Okay, thank you very much for coming today. Obviously, Claudia is very popular, so you've got lots of people coming here, so it's a full house. And sorry, people in the back, we don't have any more extra seats, but there's actually an extra one there, if anyone wants to take that. Yes.
Thank you.
Or you put the chair.
Hi, Susan.
Right. You probably know Claudia anyway, so, but she's got so many different things, she's got so much talent. It's probably easier to talk about the things that she doesn't do than the things that she actually does. She's an artist, photographer. She's a curator, collector, presenter, you name it, she's done it. So maybe we just go back one step to the beginning. So Claudia, you're obviously born into a very artistic family, creative family. Your mother's background is here. So what makes you decide you did your first art degree at Sydney College of Art. What makes you decide, as you're growing up, to do an art course? Were you always interested to be an artist?
Well, it's interesting because when I was 5, I wanted to be a doctor. And as I went through school, I realised I was absolutely hopeless at maths and science, and anything that you needed to be a good doctor. I had the empathy was there. And what do you want to be? I want to be a doctor. I want to help people. So that was quickly scratched off the list. And we were finishing high school, and it was, what are you going to do? So I thought, Sydney College of the Arts. And I didn't do the Viz Arts course at Sydney College with Darren and Kathy, who's at the back. The three of us were in visual communication design at Sydney College, and it was BA in design, focusing on photography, film, graphic design primarily. And at that time, I thought, actually, I fell in love with the 5.4 large format camera. And I thought a little dream would be to run around the place with this enormous camera and a black hood over my head, taking photographs of products and doing really, really beautiful, detailed photographs of product photography. And then I thought I also might like to be a filmmaker. And my graduating piece was a 12-minute black and white film called Sorry, Wrong Number. And it was, hello, come on in. Bayless is here, and Leslie. So Sorry, Wrong Number was a black and white detective film noir drama because I was in love with film noir and Humphrey Bogart. So, and then the interesting thing was in the first year of Sydney College, we had this thing where we had to do a visual diary. And I found it the other day. And in the visual diary, I've stuck my head on somebody else's body, and I'm sitting on top of a movie camera, and I stuck an ABC logo on it. So it was sort of weird that all those years before that, I never really realised that I would end up doing something or other at the ABC. But growing up with Claudia Chan Shaw as my mother, we were surrounded by beauty and music and design our whole lives, so it seemed to make a lot of sense to head down that road.
I believe you went to 4th Street. It's a very good academic school. So did that help you with your artistic sort of pursuit at all? I remember I went to Joey's, and John Olsen went to St. Joseph's as well, but I don't think he ever actually got his art sort of initiation at the school. So what was it like to go through 4th Street?
4th Street is and was and is still, I think, a selective school. My brother Daniel here in the front row was my sibling rights to get me in. And I have to say that the art tuition at 4th Street was not really wonderful. And so, Glenn, come in. You can't hear from out there. Push your way through. So at that stage, I was more interested in, actually, I edited one of the editors of the school magazine, so I was more interested in interviewing people and taking pictures of people. And one of my highlights was actually interviewing Bill Collins, because I was so in love with movies, and there was Mr. Movies, and I remember shaking his hand, and it was the stickiest, clammiest hand that I had ever touched in my life, but it was quite wonderful. So the art tuition wasn't wonderful. About the best thing that I created when I was in high school, besides my terrible major work for art, were a series of business cards inspired by the two Ronnies. A sketch where they had the Phantom Raspberry Blower running around the place, And the police would go up to him and say, "Yeah, I want to work with you," and he'd go. So I made a series of business cards, and the business cards were achieved by buying as many raspberry lifesavers as I could and cutting out little raspberries and sticking them in the middle of the card.
So when you were doing your course at Sydney College of the Arts, what was that like? I mean, compared to now, I believe that, was that where you met Stuart?
Stuart is my husband, for those who don't know, but everybody knows that. Stuart was actually at Sydney College of the Arts 8 years before me, and so we have an identical education, almost identical family situation and upbringing, which is really quite interesting. But Sydney College for me just opened my eyes. It was the most incredible place, and that's where I first started to learn how to take photographs. And the first adventure in the darkroom was one of the most magic experiences I'd ever experienced, just watching this image appear in the chemicals and come to life. So that for me was quite wonderful. And I spent a lot of time in the darkroom when I was at college. And in those days I used to wear the strongest perfume known to man, which is opium. And when I started going out with Stuart, he had to take an antihistamine every time we went out. So I stopped wearing opium out of my regard for him. And the darkroom, naturally, it's very dark. And you could hear people coming through the curtain into the darkroom and go, "Claude, what enlarge are you on?" Because they could smell me. And then we graduated to do C41 colour processing and learning how to print colour prints. And it was just another world. I loved it.
Yes. Actually, I remember the darkroom as well. When I was doing my architecture degree, we all had to do art, and I did photography as well. And it's nothing like now, you know, like with all the digital photography and so on. So that brings us to this current exhibition, Poster Boy. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind it.
Now I do expect that seeing you all rest to your chair, so you do have a look around before you leave. This exhibition, Poster Boy, there are a series of photographs, and a lot of people look at them and think they look like posters. Well, it's supposed to look like posters. And the idea is that, you know, when you're walking along the street and you see posters stacked up on the wall, and then there's one poster and then there's another stuck on top with it covering up the original message, and then somebody else has come around and ripped a bit off. And so this whole concept of the layering of images and the breakdown of the original communication to become a totally new communication when another poster and message is put on top and then breaks down is what I find very interesting. And these images are taken in the streets of Sydney, Melbourne, Barcelona and Paris. And not that on some of them that you could tell by because not all of them have typography. I love typography, and I love strong colours, so I like the blocks of colour and the partial story that can be expressed through partial words, or where you get to fill in the gaps. And I like the viewer to fill in what they think the image might have said. Just over here, the 1 second from the end, it's broken down, but the message is, "I don't care what you do to me, just do it fast." So that actually was the first one in the series, and I thought, hello, we're onto something here, I like this. Every image is curated in camera, so if there's a whole massive wall, I'll go and hone in on one section that I think looks beautiful. So they're not a whole bunch of photos that are cropped after the event. Everything is intentional and curated in camera.
So there's no Photoshop in any of these?
The only photoshopping is to give it a name and maybe to boost the colour a little bit.
So Claudia, do you have any favourite city that you've travelled to?
Well, I love Paris in the springtime. love Paris. Absolutely adore Paris. Feel very comfortable there. We've been fortunate enough to visit Paris many times in our business, Claudia Chan Shaw. Before we started making our own jewellery, we were going to the Pret-a-Porter every year to buy accessories and jewellery. And so Paris is high on the list, and New York, of course. Vivian and I spent many years, and when I say Vivian, I'm not being disrespectful, it just sounds silly if you say mum. So, Vivian and I spent many years travelling to New York every season because we had an agent on 7th Avenue there where we were selling our fashion.
So, Claudia, you're also a collector. Maybe can you tell us a little bit about your collection?
Come in. Squeeze in. Can you hear at the door? Oh.
Maybe come and stand.
Come in.
Maybe here.
And even on the land?
Yeah, even on the land that we can see the outside. So now collection.
Welcome. Come on in. Hi, Mary. So the question was, you're a collector, what do you like to collect? So Stuart and I are both gatherers, hunter-gatherers, collectors, and so our combined possessions in our house are a little bit eclectic and varied. But for me, the major collection are tin toys. So tin toys and robots, and they can either be battery operated or they can be wind up. And there are several hundred in our house, and they're in glass cases. And it's not the house of crazy people, it's the house of passionate people. There are also many, many books. There are photographs and artwork on every single wall in the house. Actually, Stuart and I have just been doing a bit of rearranging, and we had to actually, you know, where you've got backsliding doors and you go into a back right and you open the sliding door. Well, that little space above the sliding door, which is about that wide, we just put another 5 pictures up the top of the door because we run out of space. Stuart's collections include fossils and over 3,000 bottles of wine, and a collection of first edition books, and much more.
Is that what leads to the TV series that you presented? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the TV series was Collectors on ABC TV, and the team from Collectors rang me one day and said, would you like to be on our show with your collection of toys? And I thought, sure, I'd like to do that. And so I came on the show and showed off my children, and about 2 months later I got a call saying the female presenter of the show was leaving to continue her family and have a second baby, and would I like to come and audition for a presenter's role. And I remember getting off the phone and I was in the office and I said, Mum, I can't believe this, but ha ha ha, yeah, I'll go down and give it a try. So they said to me, bring one of an object that you can talk about for the audition. And I thought, well, I won't take any toys because I've just seen that, we just did an episode on that. So I took with me the Maltese falcon. And my Maltese falcon is just like the Maltese falcon that you see in the Humphrey Bogart 1941 film. And it is one of my most prized possessions, probably the first indication that I was going to be a nutcase collector. And so I took the object down, and just like we did on the show where you had to go, well, this bottle top is made in 1942, and as you can see, it's made of metal. I took the Maltese falcon down and told the whole story of the falcon. So I'm there, the camera's running, I'm going, blah, 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 blah. And 4 days later I got a phone call saying I had the role as presenter, and it was the most wonderful show to work on because I met so many kindred spirits. But besides meeting kindred spirits, it was just a joy travelling around the country and working in such an incredible, vibrant, creative, obsessive environment. It suited me very well.
You also wrote a book, Collector Mania, so maybe you can tell us about that as well.
The lovely thing about the show Collectors was that it gave me a lot of opportunities. It gave me my first opportunities to start doing lectures and talks at the Archive of New South Wales, which continue to this day, but it was all a jumping off point from, obviously they thought you might know something if you chatted on television. How wrong they were. But one Friday afternoon I received an email from HarperCollins Publishers, and they said, would you like to write a book on collecting? And I remember ringing my mum going, hey Mum, how about that? So the book Collector Mania was published in 2012, and it covers the joys of collecting everything from snow domes, where I photographed my brother's collection, shoes, where I photographed many of my mother's shoes. So I think we're getting a pattern here. Wine, where I photographed my husband's collection. So it was everything from records to vintage fashion to classic cars to first edition books to cameos, toys naturally. So the book was a delight because I was out interviewing wonderfully crazy people who had a similar passion to me and other members of my family. And the lovely thing was also that I got to do a book tour travelling around the country and meeting other people who also like to collect.
Did you interview any psychologists about this collecting too? Because I'm a collector myself, and that's what I find. I collect everything when I was a child, and then now I'm collecting art, and it's one of those things that I can't avoid.
It's true. You either are a collector or you are not. And the statistic is that 1 in 3 people collects something. Whether it's jam jar labels, Barbie dolls, Virginia Ferris, or cars. So it is an obsessive behaviour, and it is not to be confused with hoarding, because we say hoarders have no order. A hoarder is somebody who gathers what is generally considered to be rubbish, and I'm not denigrating any magazine collectors or anything like that, but it's the newspapers, the magazines, the jam jar labels, the used ice cream containers, the things that are considered to be useless, that don't do anything. They just pile them up, they take over their lives, and that really take over their homes, so much so that it actually becomes quite dangerous. And there's a very famous story of 2 brothers, the Collier brothers, which is featured in my book Mania, and they actually died in their New York brownstone house because there was so much junk in the house. They were so mistrustful of the outside world, they built booby traps amongst the junk in the house so that anybody who was peeking through the window or tried to get into the house would be captured. The sad thing was that one of the brothers died in one of his own homemade booby traps, and his brother, for whom he was caring, died of starvation because the brother couldn't get to him. So they had things like